A black waitress breaks protocol when a disabled boy unexpectedly asks her to dance in the middle of an elite five-star restaurant. What begins as a quiet act of kindness stirs whispers, stuns the crowd, and catches the cold gaze of the boy's powerful father, a man used to control, not vulnerability. But what no one knows is that act of kindness will ripple far beyond a restaurant walls, unraveling buried grief, unexpected truths, and a transformation none of them saw coming. In a world obsessed with perfection, one imperfect moment dares to rewrite everything. The soft hum of a grand piano glided through the air like silk, mingling with the quiet clink of cutlery and murmured conversations. Inside Delacroix, one of California's most exclusive restaurants perched along the coastline, everything exuded refinement. Candlelight danced over polished glass, and waitstaff moved like shadows between linen-draped tables. It was a place where everything was expected to be flawless. Tiana, a 28-year-old waitress with warm brown skin, sharp cheekbones, and a practiced professional grace, navigated her usual rhythm of serving in silence. She had worked here for 5 years, never late, never loud, never seen unless needed. She had mastered invisibility in places like this. At table 9, however, sat someone who shattered all expectations. Elijah, a 10-year-old boy in a crisp blazer and khakis, shifted in his seat. His legs were encased in metal braces, making every movement deliberate and difficult. He had sat quietly through dinner, eyes on the piano player in the corner. But now, as the music drifted into a light waltz, he did something no one expected. He stood. Tiana, arms full of dishes, paused mid-step as Elijah shuffled into the narrow space between tables. Every sound in the room seemed to freeze. Elijah turned to her and extended a trembling hand. His voice was soft but audible. "Will you dance with me?" Gasps flickered like wine through the room. Tiana's mouth parted slightly. For a moment, she looked to the adults around him. None moved. Her eyes met Nathaniel Quinn, Elijah's father, a man cloaked in quiet power, sitting stone-faced at the far side of the table. Everyone in the state's financial sector knew his name. But the manager, Mr. Weston, reacted first. "Miss," his voice sliced through the stillness. "Absolutely not. This is a fine dining establishment, not a ballroom." He stepped forward, authority in his stride. "This is inappropriate. Sit the boy down." Nathaniel blinked, tension tight across his jaw. It was the first time he'd brought Elijah to a public venue since the accident 2 years ago. And this was the nightmare scenario he had dreaded. Tiana glanced at Elijah's hand still stretched in quiet hope. "I can't dance in an apron," she said suddenly. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. In one smooth movement, she set down her tray, unknotted her apron, and folded it neatly on the nearest table. Then, she bent slightly and took Elijah's hand. "Lead the way," she said softly. The piano played on. Tiana followed the boy's hesitant steps, adjusting her pace to match his slow, strained movements. Each scrape of metal brace against the floor was audible, but so was the quiet awe that filled the space. The boy's eyes were focused, his lips pressed together in effort. For once, he wasn't being guided. He was leading. The whispers came quickly. "She's going to be fired," someone muttered from a nearby booth. "She's making a scene." But Nathaniel wasn't listening. He wasn't breathing. His mind reeled back to a living room filled with sun, where his late wife once twirled their son in her arms, whispering, "It's not about being perfect. Let him lead." Now, that same boy, scarred, shy, and struggling, stood tall in the middle of a room that had never once made space for him. And beside him was a stranger who had given him dignity without asking for anything in return. Tiana didn't speak. She didn't rush. When Elijah began to tire, she gently slowed the steps and led him back to the table like a partner at the end of a ball. He bowed his head shyly. "Thank you," he said. She smiled and replied, "It was an honor." Then she turned, picked up her apron, and walked back to the kitchen, without apology, without shame. Nathaniel rose from his chair, fists clenched loosely by his sides. Mr. Weston rushed to his side, flustered. I assure you, Mr. Quinn, this will be addressed. That woman, she's crossed the line. She'll be dealt with immediately. Nathaniel didn't reply. He simply looked toward the kitchen door, where Tiana had vanished. And for the first time in years, he felt something shift. Not in the restaurant, not in his son, but in himself. The kitchen door swung shut behind Tiana with a hard clack, muffling the noise from the dining room, but not the tension that followed her like a shadow. She didn't get 2 steps in before Mr. Weston cornered her by the sink, his face tight with suppressed fury. What the hell was that? He hissed. Are you out of your mind? You embarrassed this restaurant in front of one of the most powerful clients we've ever had. Tiana didn't flinch. She reached for her apron and folded it calmly. He asked me to dance, she said quietly. He just wanted to be seen. This is not a daycare. This is Delacroix. You think your little moment was worth compromising our image. His voice dropped lower. You're done here, Tiana. Leave your uniform. HR will contact you. She stood still for a moment, letting the weight of his words settle. Fired. Just like that. Not for being late. Not for being negligent. For being human. Understand, she replied. No angue. No te has. She simply walked to her locker, changed out of her uniform, and stepped out into the cool California night, jobless but not ashamed. That evening, across the city in a high-rise overlooking the Pacific, Nathaniel Quinn stood in front of his expansive window, untouched scotch in hand. Below him, the city glowed with artificial life. Inside, it was silent, except for the hum of memory playing in his mind. Elijah's eyes, bright with pride. The way he held his head high. The moment he said, "Thank you," like a proper young man after a first dance. Nathaniel turned away from the glass, raking a hand through his hair. It had been 2 years since the accident. 2 years of sterile hospitals, whispered prognosis, guilt-ridden silence. He had thrown money at the problem, hired the best therapists, bought the best equipment, built an entire wing of their home for Elijah's recovery. But none of it had made his son smile like that. And the woman, Tiana, she hadn't tried to fix or instruct. She simply followed. A waitress. No, not just a waitress. There was something in the way she carried herself, something that defied the confines of the apron she wore. It had been years since anyone had defied him without fear, and longer since someone reminded him of his late wife. Her warmth, her quiet insistence that their son wasn't broken, just different. He didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, Tiana was pouring cereal in her tiny studio apartment when her phone buzzed. The number on the screen was unknown, but the tone on the other end was crisp and professional. Ms. Tiana, this is Ms. Carter from Quinn Capital. Mr. Quinn would like to meet with you this morning, 10 a.m., if you're available. Tiana blinked, spoon halfway to her mouth. Excuse me? Quinn, Capital. Yes. Mr. Quinn asked for you personally. She hung up in a daze. Quinn, Elijah's father, the billionaire. Was this about last night? Was he filing a complaint? Was he going to sue her for touching his son? For crossing some invisible line? Still, curiosity and a sense of duty outweighed her apprehension. She pulled out the best outfit she had, a navy skirt, simple blouse, and shoes that pinched at the toes, and braided her hair back tightly. With her resume in her bag and questions swirling her chest, she boarded the bus heading toward the tall, mirrored towers that marked the financial heart of the city. She had no idea what was waiting for her, but she walked forward anyway, chin up like her mama taught her. She was a waitress. She was a dancer. She was more than anyone had ever bothered to see. And today, someone who mattered had seen her. Tiana stood in the polished marble lobby of Quinn Capital, dwarfed by floor-to-ceiling windows and towering glass pillars that glittered under the morning sun. Everyone around her moved with rehearsed efficiency, heels clicking, suits swishing, eyes glued to screens. She clutched her worn handbag with both hands, her knuckles white. The receptionist, all sharp lines and perfect posture, gave her a tight nod. Mr. Quinn will see you now. 18th floor. Straight ahead, Miss Johnson. The elevator ascended with a hush, each floor indicator blinking like a countdown. Tiana glanced at her reflection in the stainless steel walls. Her navy blue skirt and modest blouse were clean but humble, hardly the attire of someone who belonged in a building like this. But she held her head high. She'd earned this space, even if only for today. On the 18th floor, she was greeted by a sleek assistant who escorted her through a corridor of glass-walled offices. Inside the corner suite, Nathaniel Quinn stood with his back turned, gazing out over the city. His tailored charcoal suit contrasted starkly with the vulnerability in his posture. "Miss Johnson," he said without turning. "Thank you for coming." Tiana offered a polite nod. "You requested to see me, Mr. Quinn." He finally turned to face her, his expression unreadable. "Please, sit." The office was immaculate, modern, impersonal. But the man in front of her seemed less composed than the setting suggested. He didn't sit behind his desk. Instead, he leaned against it, arms folded. "I've been thinking a lot about last night," he began. "About what I saw. My son smiling, leading, dancing." Tiana listened, saying nothing. He gestured toward a leather-bound folder on the desk. "I did a little research. NYU graduate, early childhood development, co-founder of a program called Freedom Moves." She blinked, surprised. 6 years of grassroots work with kids facing physical and emotional disabilities, but no funding for nearly a year now. Tiana raised an eyebrow. "Is this an interrogation or a job interview?" Nathaniel gave the faintest smirk. "Depends how you answer. I didn't come here for a job, Mr. Quinn." "I know," he said, quieter now, "but I want to offer one anyway. A private position, guiding Elijah's recovery, developmental support, therapeutic companionship. Call it what you want. I'll make sure you're paid 5 times what you were making at the restaurant." Tiana tilted her head slightly. "You think money is what makes this work?" "No," he admitted, "but I'm trying to give my son every possible chance." She studied him, his furrowed brow, the tension in his jaw. "He doesn't need another paid expert," she said. "He needs someone who listens, who doesn't look at him like a project." "I'm not trying to buy empathy," he protested. "Maybe not intentionally. But that's what this feels like." She stood slowly. "With all due respect, Mr. Quinn, I'm not for sale. And your son deserves more than obligation." He looked genuinely taken aback. "You're turning me down?" "I'm inviting you," she said, reaching into her bag and pulling out a folded flyer. "Freedom Moves, Tuesday and Thursday, 4 p.m. The first class is free, and the rest is pay what you can." He took the flyer, surprised. The bright, homemade colors and uneven lettering looked almost absurd in the sterile elegance of the office. But he stared at it like it was the most foreign thing he'd held in years. "He'll be welcome," Tiana added gently. "If he wants to come. No cameras. No expectations. Just space for him to move the way he needs to." Nathaniel looked up at her. His voice, when it came, was rougher than before. "Thank you." She nodded. "You're welcome." As she turned to leave, he spoke again. "Why did you really dance with him?" She paused at the door. "Because no one else was listening." Then she walked out, heels echoing on polished floors, leaving behind a man who was only just beginning to realize the difference between control and connection. The purr of a luxury engine broke the afternoon quiet outside a modest community center in south-central Los Angeles. A black Bentley, gleaming and out of place among faded parking lines and chalk-stained sidewalks, came to a slow stop in front of the entrance. Inside the vehicle, Nathaniel Quinn sat still, hands gripping the steering wheel with more tension than necessary. Beside him, Elijah shifted in his seat, his fingers anxiously tapping the handle of his walking aid. The boy's braces were polished, his shirt tucked neatly. He looked up at his father and offered a faint smile, seeking permission more than encouragement. "You ready?" Nathaniel asked, his voice low. Elijah nodded. They stepped out together. The contrast was stark. Father and son dressed like they belonged in a private school courtyard, not a weathered brick building with colorful paper signs taped to the windows. One sign, bright and hand-drawn, read, "Your rhythm, your rules." Nathaniel held the door open for Elijah, unsure of who was leading whom anymore. Inside, the atmosphere buzzed with motion, but not the kind that demanded perfection. There were no mirrors, no rehearsed routines. Instead, Children spun in wheelchairs, tapped feet in braces, waved arms with joy rather than technique. Music pulsed gently through the speakers, not loud, not rigid, but free. Tiana stood by the front desk, clipboard in hand, her face calm but watchful. She saw them before they saw her, and when their eyes met, she offered a simple nod, not one of victory, but of welcome. "This way," she said to Elijah, gently beckoning him forward. Nathaniel followed, but remained near the back of the room. He looked out of place in his crisp jacket and tailored shoes, but he didn't move to leave. He watched. Elijah hesitated at first, holding back by the wall. But when a boy about his age rolled over in a wheelchair and offered a fist bump, the tension in his shoulders softened. Tiana walked over, kneeling beside him. "No one here is perfect, Elijah, but we all move, however we can." Elijah blinked, uncertain. Then, slowly, he stepped onto the open floor. The room didn't freeze like it had in the restaurant. No one stared. No one judged. A girl in leg casts gave him a wave. A boy with hearing aids clapped offbeat. Elijah took one step, then another. The metal of his braces didn't squeak this time. It whispered, and then it happened. One step fully on his own. No support, no guiding hand, just a shaky but deliberate lift of the foot and forward motion. Nathaniel straightened from his place against the wall. His mouth parted slightly, and for a moment, he forgot the emails, the meetings, the empires waiting outside. His world narrowed to the boy in the center of the room. Elijah turned, pride lighting up his face, searching for his father's reaction. Nathaniel nodded, his throat tight. "I saw it," he said, more to himself than anyone else. "I saw it." Tiana joined him quietly. "It's not about speed. It's about choice." He chose to step. That's the healing. Nathaniel looked around at the mismatched posters, the kids laughing as they stumbled and twirled. The linoleum floors were scuffed. The sound system was secondhand, but it was more alive than any therapy room Elijah had ever stepped into. "No pressure," Tiana added. "No measurements. Just movement." Nathaniel glanced at her, the woman who had danced with his son without asking permission, and now stood beside him like an equal. "This place, it works," he said quietly. "It works," she replied, "because here, Elijah is not being fixed. He's just being." The music changed to a slower beat, and a few kids began pairing up, experimenting with improvised routines. Elijah didn't look to Tiana this time. He invited the boy in the wheelchair to move with him. They created something clumsy, joyful, and utterly unique. Nathaniel's hands clenched in his pockets. For the first time in years, he felt powerless in the best possible way. The hum of conversation grew louder as the doors to the community center opened again. This time, not for students or parents, but for a cluster of local journalists carrying cameras, notebooks, and curious eyes. Tiana glanced at the clock on the wall. Right on time. Zoe, her co-founder and longtime best friend, gave a quick nod as she approached with a tablet in her hand. "Press kits are out. The media release went live an hour ago. We're officially published." Tiana took a steadying breath. The academic journal article they'd co-authored, Movement Autonomy in Neurodivergent Youth, a case for non-directive therapy, was now live. Their names were attached. So was Elijah's. Across the room, Elijah laughed as he helped another child navigate a rhythm game. He moved with ease, still assisted by a brace, but not defined by it. His joy was unfiltered, his spirit untouched by the stiffness of formal therapy sessions he once endured. Nathaniel stood nearby, arms crossed, absorbing it all. The billionaire's presence didn't go unnoticed by the reporters. One journalist, a woman with a press badge from the Los Angeles Herald, stepped forward. "Mr. Quinn," she began, holding out a mic. "Can I ask you a few questions?" Nathaniel hesitated, surprised to be addressed so directly. His usual instinct was to wave them off. But this wasn't a boardroom or a red carpet. This was his son's space. He nodded. "Your foundation has historically prioritized high-end research initiatives. Is it true that Freedom Move submitted multiple funding proposals to Quinn Capital that were rejected?" Tiana froze where she stood. Zoe's eyes widened. The room quieted. Nathaniel looked from the reporter to Elijah, who now stood at the center of the dance floor, trying to coordinate a small group of children through a pattern of steps he had invented himself. He took a breath. Yes, Nathaniel admitted. That's true. A few cameras clicked, journalists jotting notes rapidly. But he continued, voice firm, what I witnessed today, and in the days leading up to it, has shown me the limits of traditional thinking. He turned to face the room fully, his gaze sweeping across the children, the staff, the faded posters, and finally landing on Tiana. Her expression remained calm, though her fingers dug slightly into the edge of her clipboard. I dismissed this program without truly understanding what it stood for. I saw a proposal. I missed the people behind it. That was a mistake. The reporter raised an eyebrow. So what now? Nathaniel stepped forward, voice clearer now. As of this moment, the Quinn Foundation will commit to fully funding freedom moves for the next 5 years, including the immediate development of a state-of-the-art rehabilitation and movement center, one built in collaboration with this team, with full autonomy over its methodology. A beat of stunned silence passed through the crowd, and then applause. Not from the journalists, but from the parents standing in the back, from the volunteers who had shown up week after week for years, from the kids who clapped without really understanding the details, but recognizing the shift in energy. Tiana blinked hard, keeping her composure. She hadn't expected him to say all that. Not publicly, not now. She turned slightly towards Zoe, who looked just as shocked. I told you the truth could move mountains, Zoe whispered, squeezing her shoulder. Nathaniel approached Tiana slowly. You didn't just help my son walk, he said quietly, so only she could hear. You helped him lead. You reminded me what that word really means. Tiana gave a small nod. I told you he didn't need a specialist. He needed space. And you needed a platform, he said, not permission. They shook hands, not as Billionaire and Waitress, but as partners in something neither of them had predicted. As cameras clicked and reporters typed, the story was already spreading. A black woman dismissed for showing compassion, a child dismissed for needing space, and a powerful man who, for once, followed rather than led. Outside, the Bentley still gleamed in the sun. But inside, it was a different kind of brilliance that filled the room, unfiltered, unstoppable, and finally undeniable. The early morning sun poured gold over the site of what would soon become the Freedom Moves Rehabilitation and Movement Center. What had once been an abandoned lot behind the community center was now alive with scaffolding, blueprint charts flapping in the wind, and the rumble of machinery. Workers in hard hats moved with purpose, their steps weaving through a skeleton of beams that promised something revolutionary. Tiana stood just outside the perimeter, clipboard in hand, eyes shielded by sunglasses. She wore a simple cream blouse and jeans, her braid tucked neatly beneath a ball cap. She wasn't watching for delays or errors. She was absorbing the shift, the manifestation of an idea once dismissed as too soft. A sleek black car pulled up at the curb. Nathaniel Quinn emerged, no tailored suit today. Just rolled-up sleeves, work boots dusted with gravel, and a leather-bound notebook under one arm. He nodded to the foreman before crossing to where Tiana stood. I read the revised plans, he said, holding up the notebook. Zoe's updates to the sensory room layout. They make sense. We'll get better light angles that way. Tiana gave a quiet nod. She's good with space. So are you, he replied. They stood in silence for a beat, watching a group of volunteers unload adaptive equipment from a nearby truck. A muralist was outlining figures on one of the exterior walls, dancers of all kinds, caught mid-movement, bound by nothing. Nathaniel took a slow breath. You were right, you know. Tiana didn't look at him. About what? About what he needed. About what I was doing, trying to control everything. Buying solutions instead of understanding the problem. She finally turned to him. That's growth. You've been doing the work. I've been trying. He chuckled dryly. Turns out, neuroscience journals aren't exactly light reading. But Elijah's been teaching me more than any paper ever could. Tiana smiled faintly. He always had it in him. Nathaniel's gaze dropped for a moment. Then he spoke, softer now. There's something that's been sitting with me. Something I need to ask. Tiana raised an eyebrow, but waited. Back when I offered you the job, when I told you I wanted to help, you never really accepted any of it. Not fully. And lately, I've been wondering, he paused. Why didn't you ever accept my apology? She looked at him steadily. Because you never gave one. Nathaniel froze, caught. Tiana continued, voice steady. You offered money. You offered title. You even offered partnership. But not once did you say, I'm sorry for how I treated you. I'm sorry for trying to erase your boundary with a paycheck. He exhaled slowly, like someone who hadn't realized they were holding their breath. You're right, he admitted. I didn't. I thought, maybe doing enough would say it for me. It doesn't, she said. It never does. Another silence settled between them. This one not of tension, but of recognition. I'm sorry, he said finally, for dismissing your work, for not seeing you as someone who already had the answers, for trying to lead when I should have been listening. Tiana nodded once. Thank you. There was no embrace, no swelling music, no dramatic gesture, just two people standing in shared understanding, with dirt on their shoes and a blueprint of a better world unfolding before them. In the distance, Elijah walked across a balance beam set up temporarily by the therapists. His gait was slow, but steady, no braces today, just a slight limp and a determination that outshone it. Volunteers clapped, a few children cheered. Nathaniel's eyes followed his son, soft with pride. He barely needs my hand anymore. Tiana watched too. Because you finally let go. They stood side by side, beneath the growing shadow of what they were building. Not just a center, but a philosophy. A shift. A place where no one had to ask for permission to move. And this time, they were doing it together. Sunlight spilled across the smooth glass facade of the Freedom Moves Rehabilitation and Movement Center, lighting it up like a cathedral of possibility. The front plaza buzzed with energy. Ribbons fluttered in the wind. Cameras clicked, and a gathering of families, local officials, and press filled the courtyard. But inside, beyond the crowd and speeches, something far more profound was taking place. In the heart of the center's main studio, children filled the wide, open space, each moving in their own rhythm. Some spun in wheelchairs. Others tapped their feet or waved their arms with gleeful abandon. At the center of it all was Elijah, dressed in a loose white shirt and soft black pants. Braces now reduced to slim supports that didn't hinder his steps, but honored the journey that brought him here. The music swelled gently, not choreographed or controlled, but alive. Elijah moved with confidence, turning, gesturing, initiating playful interactions with the others. His smile was wide, his posture upright. No hesitations, no apologies, just freedom. Near the edge of the room, Nathaniel stood with his hands clasped loosely in front of him, his eyes fixed on his son. The usual armor, designer watches, stern expressions, CEO presence, was gone. In its place, every laugh Elijah shared, every joyful stumble, every outstretched hand was a reminder that healing had never been in hospitals or spreadsheets. It had always lived in connection. A reporter approached quietly, notebook poised. Mr. Quinn, if I may, you've donated millions to this project, attended every planning session, even sat in on dance workshops. What's the greatest lesson this journey has taught you? Nathaniel didn't look away from the floor, from the children dancing like they were made of music and sunlight. He answered simply, his voice calm and sure. True leadership isn't about guiding every step. It's about knowing when to follow. The reporter nodded, but the words weren't for her. They were for Elijah, for the boy who had once stood up in a silent restaurant and asked a stranger to dance. From across the room, Tiana watched. She didn't wave. She didn't step forward. She simply smiled, because she knew this wasn't just a center. It wasn't even just a dance. It was the moment the world shifted, quietly, powerfully, because someone had finally chosen to follow. If this story touched your heart, like, share, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell for more powerful, soul-touching stories that restore faith in humanity.